Abdullah the Butcher was like a nightmare come to life. He terrified people.
Just a savage, bloody, thirsty machine.
Trying to rip the eyeball.
When Abdullah walks in the ring, you know you're going to get blood. Every match he was in, he bled. You bled.
Oh my God, right on the head.
One of the most infamous wrestlers of all time, Abdullah the Butcher, left a legacy of violence and bloodshed wherever he went, from Puerto Rico to Japan and across North America.
It's Abdullah! Think about what he's experiencing. He's getting cooked.
You can't think of a heel that was bigger than Abdullah. You can't.
He made money everywhere he went.
But the more money we made, the more danger we had to face.
Even though Abdullah was playing a character, inside, that was him.
He would have people with slingshots hitting him and then throwing things at him because they think he's hurt the damn guy.
Fans at ringside, when he got too close, I mean, they were running.
Everybody's bloodthirsty. Everybody is bloodthirsty. They want it.
Notorious for blurring the line between reality and fiction, Abdullah remained a mystery even to those closest to him.
See, you all know the wrestler. You don't know the person.
He's a hero all the time. He was a very good person.
In a gruesome but successful career spanning 7 decades, Abdullah's thirst for blood made him infamous, but also led to his downfall.
He cost me my WWE career. That was a fact. The Hep C caused me not to have my WWE contract. You're a piece of shit, and I hope that when you die a really slow and painful death.
Open on the forehead, acting like he finds the taste of the blood pleasurable.
Abdullah the Butcher would come into a regional wrestling territory and just set business on fire.
Blood everywhere.
The difference between Abdullah and everyone else is when anyone else came into the territory, fans were rooting for their favorite to win. When Abdullah came in, they were rooting for their favorite to survive.
Oh, what a vicious chop. He's getting ready to carve up a steak there and eat it.
Hello, I'm Mick Foley, sometimes known as the Hardcore Legend, and I have been involved with professional wrestling since 1985. I knew of the legend of Abdullah because in those days, you learned about people outside of your geographic area largely by the magazines. And the magazines painted this amazing portrait of this unstoppable monster. I was so intrigued by Abdullah the Butcher that the first thing I did when I got to college as a freshman is I put a black and white photo of him on the wall and began to tell the entire dormitory that he was my father.
When you have those Taekwondo karate pants and you see him with a fork with all those gigantic cuts, and he opens those big eyes, and you see him on promos eating liver and the blood of the liver coming out. That's Abdullah the Butcher, and he was unstoppable. My name is Hugo Sabinovich. I'm from Guayaquil, Ecuador, and I've been in this passionate industry for close to 50 years, and I will do it again. Love Lucha Libre. No one was safe.
Here he comes again. He hits Bronco Lovett.
Not the referee, not the owner of the company. He will put fear into your body, into your brain, your soul.
What's happening in here? Can you explain to everybody what you're watching?
Yeah, eating the raw meat, chicken. And he could even take a phone book and tear it in half. My name's Josephine Heron Shreve. Abdullah the Butcher is my brother. Windsor at that time, when I was growing up, I always say that's old school. And it was like we was raised in a 2-bedroom house, wartime house. There was 8 of us. 2 or 3 of us slept in a bed together. I had my own room because I slept in the bathtub. I had a cushion to put in there. My father and I have to go to the bathroom. They piss in a can.
My mother had to come in the washroom. She knock on the door, and I get out of the tub and let her in. Because I don't think my mother wanted to piss in a can. Okay, that's the way it was. My name is Ralph Shreves. I am Larry Paul Shreves' brother as Abdullah the Butcher. I call him Larry. That's his name to me. Abdullah the Butcher is his money name, his wrestling name. If you ever interview him, you just look at his damn head. Do you ever interview him? Oh, there you go then. I guess he tells the truth, but I'll tell you one thing. There, I think you should be better off talking to him a longer distance. You have your ass jump up in 1 minute. And you scared to death. He's a good actor.
Oh, this man. 大会に参加いたしました。特に
Oh yeah, we just gotta.
I wanted to take it off to say, oh, I got my head off. Let me take my head off.
Looking good.
There he is.
There he is.
Oh, it really is you.
My name is Larry Shreve. My other wrestling name is Abdullah the Butcher. I'm from Khartoum, Sudan, but now, since I'm pretty near out, I'm from Khartoum, Sudan, Windsor, Ontario.
Your parents had to take care of a lot of kids. Like, was it challenging?
Oh, they worked hard. My mother worked hard. My dad worked hard.
Yeah.
When I see my mother on the floor, scrubbing floors, at a funeral home, I said to myself, holy shit, my mother works hard. But I never knew that she was on her hands and knees until I went there. I didn't want to learn how to read or write because I was only worrying about my mother and father. I wanted to make money. I used to buy candy, 3 for a penny, go to school, and you want to buy some candy? Right? I'd sell it for maybe a penny a piece or whatever. Where the kids owed me money, and I said, when are you going to pay me my money? So maybe he got scared, like I was going to do something, right? So he wouldn't go to school. Maybe his mother came and says, my kid is scared to come to school. And that was it. Then I said, I got to get out of here and try to make some, money where I don't have a problem. And that's what I done.
So Larry only finished the 2nd grade?
He only finished the grade 2nd. I was a year smarter than him, and I'm not really that smart myself. But I'm saying we done a lot. Larry, he went to people's houses knocking on their door and asking for old clothes and all that. And he had a second-hand store with all kinds of old clothes, and he had a store.
He shined shoes for years. Then he got a janitorial service business.
He had people cutting grass and all that. He had a truck where he went around moving stuff out of people's basements and all that. He was a worker.
Let's just say he was always a hustler.
He been in the karate and all that. He had a karate place where, like senior citizens, he trained them to learn how to defend themselves. That's right in Windsor. You had about 8 or 9 old ladies in their 60s or 70s, and he had it where they could defend themselves. Just old people and that.
I was down at the Windsor Arena, and I was doing karate and stuff like that, and the manager of the place, he said, hey, you should be a wrestler. I said, oh, I don't want to do that crap. He said, you can make some money. I said, oh, okay.
Abdullah crosses the river to Detroit, where he meets the original Sheik, one of the innovators of hardcore wrestling.
Wait a minute, the Sheik has got that fire! How about that despicable act of fighting?
Abdullah playing an Arabic wrestler, they only had one at that time, and that was, they called him the Sheik, not the Iron Sheik, the Sheik out of Detroit. He used to do all that stuff. Cut you with your forehead, walk around crazy.
Just pulled out that fireball!
Hi, this is Mr. USA WWE Hall of Famer, Tony Atlas. grew up watching the sheep. He imitated the sheep.
His eyes out of his camel clutch or anything of that nature. Wait a minute, that's my spark.
Corner post. Oh, this is a grudge match. This is war.
I told my dad, I said, Dad, I'm wrestling at Cobo Hall. My dad says, those are some dangerous people over there. My dad used to see me with cuts on my head. He told my mother, tell him that you better get out of that shit. I said, Dad, listen, smack me. He said, for what? I said, just smack me. He went, you see me bleeding. He said, I didn't hit you that hard. Then I showed him the blade. He said, now I know you're crazy.
Having learned this bloody trick of the trade, Abdullah travels the world showcasing his hardcore style. While working in Puerto Rico, he meets promoter Carlos Colon and his right-hand man, Hugo Savinovich.
I started working with Carlos, and they say, you're good, but you're not big enough. He says, I want to make you a manager. And then he says, by the way, we're bringing into Puerto Rico one monster, Abdullah the Butcher, and I have heard of him, and I said, wow, I mean, what a way to begin a managing career. Managing him, it was, just a crazy, crazy way of earning a living.
Everybody just going crazy here.
By 1983, he was already drawing gigantic money in the Caribbean islands and Puerto Rico. People will fill up the stadiums. Abdullah will make the promoter, Carlos Colon, look good. But at the same time, he will destroy him.
Perhaps the fear of being involved in this match.
Abdullah would wrestle in Puerto Rico for a couple of months. He wrestled in Japan for a couple of months. And then he would come back to the States.
Whoa.
And he was a big draw. I mean, wherever he went, he drew money.
Abdullah was worth every penny that he got paid, and trust me, he was making huge money. He lived really like a rich guy.
Abdullah was very, very cautious of his money. When he got paid, as soon as you give it to him, he'd count it.
I made sure my mother and father, my brothers and sisters, got some of it. My mother used to work for the funeral home and stuff like that. I went there one day and I said, come on, Ma. She said, what? She said, I want you to meet Mrs. I said, I don't want to meet them. You understand? You're here scrubbing floors and stuff like that, and I'm supposed to be Abdullah the Butcher, and you're on your hands and knees scrubbing floors and stuff. From that day, she never worked another day of her life. And I made sure of that. But I was dumb. I didn't have the schooling. Like I tell you, if I know what I know now, everybody shafts me. You understand?
Despite his successful and profitable rise to fame, Abdullah today finds himself in legal trouble and financial ruin.
What has the whole situation been like for you personally?
Hell. You don't know who in hell's working with you or working against you. You understand? I'm in bad shape. Real bad shape.
And anybody, anywhere, that does not fear the name of the almighty Abdullah the Butcher is either an insane fool or they're lying to you.
With Larry Shreve, yeah, it could be really difficult for a fan to know where the character ends, where the real person begins.
He has reigned terror in the Russian
For someone who rode with him for hundreds of hours, you get to know the real guy, or what he wants to show you of the real guy.
Abdullah the Butcher moves swiftly for a big man.
See, he always talk about he's an entertainer. He's entertaining you. But the real true person, you all don't know. My name is Jocelyn Malika Marshall. I met Abdullah while I was on the streets feeding the homeless. He told me his name was Joe, and I was just so excited to see somebody else out there like myself feeding the homeless. So I didn't know he had a restaurant. gave me the address of the restaurant, and I brought my son over there. My son said, "Do you know who that is?" He said, "That's Abdullah the Butcher." And I said, "Who is that?" Because I'm not into wrestling. Abdullah was his hero.
Your son liked all the bad guys.
He loved the bad guys, yes.
Abdullah was the best heel that the world ever saw. Even picture in my head now, just the way he stands, the way he moved around the ring, and the things he did. To see a whole crowd of people move back. He could walk through an aisle and people would run from him. And when he come through that ring, people go, uh-oh, here come Abdullah. It got so it wasn't a gimmick.
He was in character most of the time, especially when we went in public. I remember seeing a flight attendant go over to him, and as soon as Abdullah saw that flight attendant, his eyes bugged out, his mouth started watering, and she tried to like get his beverage order and just walked away. I was like, "Abby, are you okay?" He goes, "Gotta protect the character, champ. Gotta protect the character." And that's what he would do. And so he, in his own way, he would create this grassroots campaign for the authenticity of his character.
When he went into the ring with any wrestler, he made them a good wrestler.
If you fight Abdullah, you fought Abdullah, you got over. People knew you the next day.
They got like a crown on their head because they're wrestling one of the best.
That's why I say Abdullah made Carlos Colon. Abdullah made Tony Mr. USA Atlas. Everybody that fought Abdullah became a big star.
Here comes Mark. There goes Kevin Malay. Duty battle continues between Abdullah and Kevin Malay.
Here he is with the big karate thrust to the head of the Dirty Dutchman tail.
What really made Abdullah was the time in Japan. In Japan, during that time, wrestling was still about 70% real. If you got a karate kick in Japan, it was a real karate kick. You got chopped in Japan, it was a real chop. The only thing that was fake in Japan was who won and who lost. He was on the cover of all these magazines. They had billboards of Abdullah, pictures of Abdullah.
He was what I call crazy over. Like, he was an iconic part of Japanese culture.
You're through. That's fine. Doesn't bother me at all.
As crazy as this might sound, he recorded an album in Japan, in the dressing room.
My name is Abdullah the Butcher. I want to do all these crazy things to you. My own family hates me because I'm too vicious.
They never seen nothing like me. I was different. They only seen the wrestling, That was it. I was different.
Having found success with the hardcore style he adapted from the Sheik, Abdullah becomes a mentor to wrestler Devin Nicholson. But this long-term friendship will end in disaster.
I actually ended his career. Retired him in the ring, retired him out of the ring. My name is Devin Nicholson, and my wrestling name was Hannibal.
There will be no more Abdullah after the 23rd.
No class, no idea how to dress.
Starting his career with Stampede Wrestling in 2001, Devin begins working under the name Madman Hannibal and soon launches his own indie promotion, Great North Wrestling. In 2006, he begins working with Abdullah.
Before all the negative stuff happened, I actually considered him somewhat of a mentor, and I would say he was the first wrestler to take me under his wing a bit and teach me about how to get heat and stuff. We ended up tag teaming and wrestling each other numerous times.
I used to work for him.
Right, you guys were friends, weren't you?
Yeah, I used to fly into Toronto or whatever, and we had shows. He'd come out to Calgary, Alberta. We'd have shows. You understand?
Abdullah, you think I'm not ready for you? I'm gonna get you
your last match in Canada. There will be some people that will always hate me for exposing him, but whatever. I don't care. I stopped him from wrestling.
Already 68 years old and 6 decades into his career, Abdullah returns to Canada to wrestle Hannibal in what's being billed as his retirement match.
I remember my first experience of Abdullah. My grandmother was actually somewhat of a wrestling fan, and I remember she let me rent a wrestling movie called I Like to Hurt People.
Against the Butcher from the Sudan, Abdullah the Butcher.
And I just remember thinking, how did they make this blood effect? You didn't really know how they did blood in those days. I'll probably have to edit this. And I know Bret Hart would put it in his mouth, he said, but I was always afraid to do that. So then you would take the blade and put it like there and tape over top. And then when it comes time to bleed, you'd pull it out. And then, I'm not gonna do it, I'm not Abdullah, but you'd slice down like that.
Now, for me to hit myself, I would hit myself like this. You see it?
I was around Abdullah a lot, and you never actually see him do the deed. The blood would arrive as if, by magic.
Abdullah had razor blades on all his fingers. First he cuts you with the razor blade.
And what is he got? He's got a fork.
And then he would take the fork and scrape it across it to make it bigger so it could bleed more. And he actually would stick that fork, he would stick it with that fork too. He started stabbing you in the head with that fork, hurt like hell.
That's Abdullah the Butcher.
And he would cut you deep.
Well, did anybody ever complain about being cut?
Not to Abdullah. Because, you see, in the older days, the guys would tell you this, suck it up. If you don't like it, you're in the wrong business, kid. Suck it up. There was no bitching and complaining in wrestling. I didn't carry a blade because I didn't juice every night. But this was part of these guys' gimmick.
Abdullah the Butcher. It can be over.
Abdullah, Bruiser Brody, Dusty Rowe. Abdullah blade every night. It's kind of like Ric Flair gotta have the roll. Well, Abdullah gotta have the blade.
Why do they call him Abdullah the Butcher? What does a butcher do? They take to make blood. They try to hurt you, to torture you.
Mm-hmm.
This guy here, he was rushed to the hospital, had 4 stitches in the back of the head, because this guy chopped him in the damn head and got cut. Don't think that this is all phony blood.
Abdullah's intense bloodlust and unpredictable style keeps him from signing with the world's largest promotion, Vince McMahon's WWE.
Vince kind of knew that Abdullah was going to be very hard to be controlled. And I think that if you would even ask Abdullah, I don't think he even trusted himself, because I don't think a lot of times he planned things.
We were going to have a tag team match in Ottawa, and before the match, we were appearing on a local television show called Rogers Daytime.
I just happened to have a fork right here. Huh? With the old,
And without this being planned or anything,
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
To be with you.
he put the male host in a headlock, walked the male host over to where there was going to be a cooking segment after. And then the guy started bleeding.
Settle. Back off. Are you gonna manage us Friday?
You know what?
You should come with me. I come to the show on Friday.
It was the weirdest moment ever. The guy was like, I just remember him shaking like that. He was like going to shock almost. It was like a guy that obviously isn't used to bleeding or getting in fights or anything.
We'll be right back after this.
I think that was 2009. You couldn't even really get away with it then. It was a miracle he did, but you could see like how in the old days he could get away with stuff like that. But I think in 2022 it would be hard to assault a TV show host and get away with it. I think he was in his late 60s by then too. So it certainly helped.
After years on the independent circuit and mentorship from Abdullah, Hannibal finally achieves his own opportunity to wrestle for the WWE.
When I was signed by WWE, he actually screamed with joy, because I guess since he never actually wrestled for them, and it was kind of like someone that kind of represented him in a way was going to get in there.
But after a series of routine blood tests, Hannibal receives career-shattering news.
In my blood test, they found that the hepatitis C virus was present, and I was like, well, first of all, I was confused on like how I would have such a thing.
A lot of guys would use dirty razor blades, because everybody didn't carry blades. So we say something like, "Hey, Abby, you got a blade I could use?" Then he go use the blade, and when you boil something, you got to do what? Give it back, and they would give it back to Abdullah. So it was very easy for somebody to catch a disease, because who knows where that blade came from or who they cut before they cut Hannibal.
Did it cross your mind at that point that it might have been Abdullah?
Yes, because there was no other way that I would have thought that I would have caught it. But I wasn't, like at this point, I didn't think that I would have the evidence or anything.
At some point, you and this guy Hannibal were friendly with each other, right?
Yeah, we were good friends. I used to work for him. He was a promoter.
Right.
So, I don't know what happened, but I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about it.
His career cut short by his hepatitis C diagnosis, Hannibal is desperate for answers.
I had a guy that was doing a documentary on me. It's called This Is Hannibal. We were hoping that it was going to be my journey to WWE movie, but it ended up just being like a sad movie.
Obviously, it didn't work out. The contract got rescinded because I have hepatitis C.
So he was the one that actually saw the cutting incident, and he showed me the clip from the 2007 match. And he's like, "What is Abdullah doing here?"
I haven't even seen footage of the match, to be honest with you. I would love to see it.
You can see here he's cutting his own head with his razor blade that's taped to his finger, right where all the scars are on his forehead, what he's been doing for the past 50 years.
And you see him doing that to my forehead. So I'm like, he's blading me.
Oh my God, so 8 years managing him in different countries, I never saw him doing that to another guy. And if that's the case, wow.
Many local news stations saw my movie and did their own stories on it, because Ottawa, I don't think ever had somebody that had made WWE. Ronald Kaza, one of the top lawyers in this area, saw the case, and with his skill as a lawyer, he was able to basically force Abdullah to provide his blood test. According to his blood work, there's a history of Hep C, so you would think that he knew, but whether he knew or not, he should have known it's dangerous to cut someone with a razor blade with blood on it.
The footage of Abdullah cutting Hannibal with a used razor blade and the results of Abdullah's blood test form the basis of a lawsuit filed by Hannibal. A lawsuit that Abdullah claims he couldn't read or understand.
I was getting a lot of letters, right? What am I going to do? Open it up? I don't know what the hell it says. If it wasn't for Malika, no. I'd really be in bad shape.
And he sat me down. He said, "Sit down, Malika." But he told me he didn't know how to read and write, and he cried like a baby. A big, huge man like this crying. I never seen a man cry like that. That's when I understood what was going on in his life. And he would ask me to open his mail and read it to him. And after I looked through it, it included the court case with Devon Nicholson. I don't know anything about that.
My sister called me and said, "You lost the case in Toronto." I said, "What?" And it was default. That's what, because I didn't show up. And that was it.
When you aspire to be a professional wrestler, this is how you celebrate a legal victory.
He ended up losing in court in both Ontario and Georgia. And he was found guilty of negligence, assault, and battery. He either knew or should have known that he had Hep C, which Abdullah still denies, even though he provided the blood tests.
Court documents show that Abdullah carries the same rare strain of hepatitis C as Hannibal. In the years that follow, Abdullah makes a range of claims, including the allegation that it was Hannibal who gave the disease to him. After the Canadian judge sees the video evidence, coupled with the confirmation that both men share the same rare strain of Hep C, the courts side with Hannibal.
It's very good to have that on the record after all these years of being called a liar.
Devon Nicholson was awarded $2.3 million in damages.
No, I don't think they should pay. No, not that much. No.
What should he have gotten?
Nothing. I wouldn't have sued him. When you get into a certain profession, you're taking a risk. Hannibal could have done it himself. That's what the guys told me. Tony, he don't change his blade. Do it yourself. He let Abdullah cut him. He could have cut himself, but he was scared to cut himself, so he got somebody else do it. And it cost him.
In dire financial straits, Abdullah continues to make wrestling-related appearances and autograph signings. Hannibal claims that Abdullah has moved around his assets in order to avoid paying him, and to this day, the matter is still in front of the courts.
He's never paid anything. Hasn't paid a penny.
Nah, I don't think he have it.
I want you all to look at this. This is dangerous. This is stuff that you haven't seen. Look at this.
Oh boy.
He has no money to repair none of this. Now this is a light fixture where the water is coming down. This is electrical. Listen.
This is how his house is right now, currently.
Right now, currently. That's why I didn't allow you all to come back there. Oh, I am stressed. I'm stressed. I've never had blood pressure until I got moved into his house. But it's worth it when you see someone being taken advantage as him. He built a career.
Should have went to school. Should have went to school to learn how to read and write. I studied money. But I needed more than that. I got shafted. All the tapes, what I made for many, many years, got nothing.
Whatever he's going through, that was all his anyways. So I don't want to say too much, I just tell her that's the truth. My brother, don't worry, but my brother he's a very nice person, but people play games with him.
Are you aware that he says that he can't read or write? Did he ever tell you that he can't read or write?
No, and I've seen him order at restaurants, reading menus. I've seen letters from him. I've seen him sign autographs. He's owned several businesses over the years and been involved with large wrestling contracts with companies like WCW and Japanese companies.
So he can't read or write?
Nope, he never could. But he'd find ways, like, if they told him, like, to go to a chicken farm or something like that, he'd draw a picture of a chicken.
I don't mean this to be humorous, but like he knew how to read a menu. You know, like we would eat out 3 times a day. He never had an issue. I don't know if that's the case. If it is, I think it's just it's an accolade for him to be that successful around the world without that ability. But I don't know. I've only recently heard that.
That's like a shock to me, because he made great business transactions. Even in a check, you have to write it. I did not know that. And 8 years we travel a lot, spent a lot of time together, and that is a shock to me. If that is a guy of a 2nd grade education, wow, that whoever was the teacher, we gotta find him or her and honor that person, because that teacher did a lot.
Abdullah the Butcher himself getting stitched up right here.
The punishing style of hardcore wrestling has a long legacy, but it often comes at great personal cost for those involved.
Abdullah and Carlos Colon invented a match with a chain going right across the ring, and they were hooked to it. And even with the rain, a storm, you could still see just all the blood coming down. It was horrendous, but for the fans, it was just devastating, the punishment that they inflicted on each other.
We felt invincible, and they trained you to feel invincible.
At those times, we would put the blood of their opponent as part of being a heel and suck the blood out of your opponent's head. When I talk about it right now, I see the expressions on the new generation, like, what the heck were you guys thinking? But, you know, back then, it was a whole different world.
Anytime you watch something, even if you watch a movie picture or something like that, they always have violence in it, right? You have like the cops and the robbers, you have this and stuff like that. It's always violence. And if you don't give the people violence, they don't come and see you.
In a twist of fate in 2021, 7 years after his own court battle, Hannibal finds himself at the center of his own controversy by brutalizing a referee.
They were looking for someone to bleed from the spike, so the promoter found this referee that was a known bleeder to take the spike. It hit him several times and it did some damage. The promoter for that show did not have any medics on site. It went on longer than it should have. Like, it was bad communication all around.
The referee, he ended up getting an infection. His head was, mutilated.
I was appalled. I saw the dude's head with, a dozen different gaffs with staples in his head. And I'm just like, what in the heck happened here? Why have charges not been pressed? Why is this guy not in jail? Even your story is saying you were recklessly, dangerously careless and damn near killed this guy because you're just sloppy. And if we believe that he got mad and actually attacked this guy with a spike, it's like, you should be in jail. You should never be booked to wrestle again. This is not good for the business. This isn't 1960 where we're going to convince somebody that he's the madman from the Sudan that attacked somebody with a spike. There's no place for that in the industry anymore.
Oh my God, that even makes no sense. You just were in a situation and wow, strange things do happen, because what are the chances that you win a court case and now you're going to do that to a referee? Crazy.
To this day, Abdullah's legal problems haunt him, and the hepatitis C controversy has tainted the legacy of his legendary career.
I know it was horrendous to hear, because you never want to hear that somebody did this to another guy. But then you also wonder, because in my case, I was around him in bloody matches, and Carlos Colon and other guys. But none of us tested, positive to that.
Hannibal eventually finds an experimental treatment that cures him of his hepatitis C, but his bitterness remains.
Is there anything that he could do to make this right?
Yes. I mean, start paying what you can, and take some responsibility for what you did. You've been found guilty in both Canada and the U.S., but you never apologized for anything. And yeah, it's just been a nightmare situation. But I would never expect that from him. So all I can do is move on, which I have been doing. I'll be honest. Talking about this situation, I mean, this is hopefully the last time I'll have to talk about it. It was a terrible period of my life, and I'm over it.
Because the lawsuit is argued in a civil trial, the judge found Abdullah the Butcher liable, but not guilty, of causing Hannibal's hepatitis C.
This is the Hall of Fame, and all these wrestlers here, these are the old ones. They're probably all dead now. They're all in the Hall of Fame with Abdullah the Butcher. Well, I put it this way: all my family is his biggest fan. He done good, and I hate to say this. There's a lot of good wrestlers, and I put it this way: he's one of the best.
Being around our next inductee always made me a little nervous. This is a man who took hardcore to another level. Take a look.
In 2011, Abdullah the Butcher is inducted into the WWE's Hall of Fame.
When I found out I was going to be in the Hall of Fame, I says, I don't believe it until they booked me there, And Terry Funk was the one who put me over strong, said nice things about me. He said, whatever people say about Abdullah the Butcher, he made these promoters a lot of money.
I cried because I know the story that to be what he became, he paid the price. And yes, he made the money, but it wasn't easy being Abdullah the Butcher.
What's missing in wrestling today is the idea that an opponent is fighting for something bigger than a title or a victory. They're fighting for their lives. That's what he brought to the table, and I don't know if anyone ever did it better than Abdullah the Butcher.
I never seen anybody that the fan was actually afraid of. They was afraid of him. And I never saw that with anybody.
I think he should be remembered for his greatness. His greatness because he is the god of wrestling. Not the negative, just one little situation, and it's not proven. He didn't get a chance to prove his innocence. I don't care if they take everything he owns. I would never turn my back on a man of greatness, such greatness. He's gonna be okay with the help of God.
Long after you're gone, what would you like people to think when they hear the name Abdullah the Butcher?
Just to give me the respect for what I done, and a lot of things people say I done, I did not do. You know what I mean? And that's all I can say. Whatever you want to think, I'll leave it up to you.
Fateful meeting. Occurring shortly after Paul's return to civilian life and Karen's latest divorce, vividly demonstrated Karen's established pattern of rapid domestic integration and her deep-seated need for an immediate sense of home and provision. And not long after her third divorce was finalized, Karen and her 3 children moved in with Paul. This incredibly swift cohabitation, following so closely on the heels of a marital dissolution that further highlighted her serial relationship failures, immediately raised red flags for her own family, indicating a haste that seemed less about profound, tested love and more about securing an immediate partner, a stable provider, and a secure home. Her brother's reaction, one of incredulity, anger, and deep concern, perfectly captured this sentiment of alarming speed. I was mad. I said, wow, that's quick. We're just divorced. And you're already in with this other guy a month later. This blunt external observation, brimming with exasperation, serve as a potent, though perhaps unheeded, warning, a premonition of instability and underlying issues that Paul, smitten, trusting, and inherently introverted, might have naively overlooked or perhaps even deliberately chosen to ignore in his eagerness for companionship. Despite the personal misgivings of Karen's family, Paul's inherent easygoing nature, his genuine kindness, and his gentle disposition allowed him to seamlessly integrate into Karen's pre-existing family unit, winning over even the skepticism of her ex-husband. But Paul's easygoing nature even won over Karen's ex-husband. He was very good with the children, and the children liked Paul. This acceptance by the children, and crucially, by their biological father, underscored Paul's genuine warmth, his sincere commitment to the new family structure, and his authentic capacity for paternal affection. Paul really thought the world of her kids. His undeniable devotion to Karen's children offered her not just a partner, but a desperately needed respite, a profound psychological break from her tumultuous, exhausting string of failed relationships and the pervasive instability they created. And he offered Karen a welcome break from her string of failed relationships. Psychologically, Paul represented a profoundly appealing and seemingly comprehensive solution for Karen, embodying the very essence of the stability, security, and permanence that she had demonstrably craved and relentlessly sought throughout her entire turbulent adult life, a craving that her past choices had consistently failed to satisfy. He represented someone who maybe could provide that stability that she had sought out her entire life. He was, at least in outward appearance and in Karen's calculated perception, the calm, safe harbor after a lifetime of emotional storms, the reliable anchor she desperately sought to moor her restless, often impulsive, spirit. Karen, Paul, and the 3 children, forming their new intricate and blended family unit, spent the next 3 years establishing their lives in Missouri, seeking to build a new foundation and cultivate a sense of rootedness that had eluded Karen in her prior transient existence. Karen, Paul, and the kids spent the next 3 years in Missouri. This period represented a relatively stable and prolonged chapter in Karen's often chaotic personal narrative, an uncharacteristically long interlude of normalcy and domestic continuity. However, by 1997, a new opportunity arose, prompting another significant geographical relocation for the family, highlighting the mobile nature of modern life, but also Paul's constant drive for betterment. They all moved to Arizona after Paul's brother told him about a job opening. This move, rather than being an impulsive emotional flight, was driven by distinctly practical and economic factors, specifically the promise of improved financial prospects and a more secure future for Paul. His brother's profession, working for a telephone company, offered a direct and appealing pathway to stable employment, which was particularly crucial given Paul's established role as a primary financial supporter for the entire household. His brother worked for a telephone company, which sounded pretty good to Paul because he was supporting her and the kids. This detail highlights Paul's growing commitment to his role as provider, conscientiously taking on the significant burden of caring for Karen and her 3 children, embodying the stability she ostensibly desired. Once settled in the vast, sunny landscape of Arizona, the family sought a permanent home, eventually choosing to root themselves in Avondale, a quiet suburban community a half-hour west of Phoenix. This new location represented a fresh start, a canvas upon which their perfect, all-American family image could truly flourish and be admired by a new community, free from the scrutinizing eyes of past failures. And after more than 3 years together, building their life and family unit with steadfast commitment, Paul's deep and enduring desire for formal commitment finally manifested, culminating in their marriage. And after more than 3 years together, Karen and Paul finally married. He wanted to marry her pretty bad. This statement speaks volumes about Paul's profound affection, his deep belief in the sanctity of marriage, and his yearning to formalize their bond with a clear, unequivocal testament to his unwavering love. For Paul, it represented the apex of his emotional investment, a secure and enduring partnership. For Karen, the motivations may have been more complex, a mix of commitment, social acceptance, and, perhaps, the final cementing of financial stability after her turbulent past. A desire perhaps contrasting Paul's more purely romantic view of marriage. The wedding, the ultimate symbolic expression of Paul's profound commitment and his boundless hope for an enduring and joyous future with Karen, took place in August of 1998 in a prominent Phoenix hotel, an elegant setting chosen for such a significant occasion. The wedding was in August of 1998 at a Phoenix hotel. Despite the challenging and often extreme desert climate during the height of Arizona's summer, notoriously known for its intense, scorching heat, the couple chose an outdoor setting for their vows, opting for a romantic, if somewhat physically demanding, aesthetic. It was 115 degrees, and it was an outside wedding, a courtyard wedding. The specific detail speaks to a certain romantic vision, perhaps a stubborn commitment to an idealized aesthetic choice, even in the face of considerable physical discomfort, a minor inconvenience overridden by the symbolic importance of the day. Remarkably, but no one seemed to mind the heat, the palpable atmosphere of joy and celebration, the collective sense of optimism for the newly formed union, evidently transcended the physical inconvenience and the challenging climatic conditions, underscoring the powerful emotional current of the event. It was widely perceived as an occasion of genuine happiness, deep love, and enduring promise, a truly picture-perfect moment. It was really very much a storybook wedding and a very happy day. This phrase, often reserved to describe events of perceived perfection and idealized romance, perfectly encapsulates the powerful public facade of their relationship, meticulously designed to project an image of idyllic love and marital harmony. Everyone present, witnessing the apparent joy, mutual commitment, and societal conformity, held genuinely high hopes for the family's future, believing implicitly in their longevity and happiness. Everyone saw an optimistic future for this family. This shared optimism was not merely sentimental. It was bolstered by tangible signs of stability and burgeoning prosperity. Paul was not only consistently employed, but actively excelling in his career, diligently securing a solid financial foundation for his growing family. Paul was making good money in the telecommunications field, providing a bedrock of economic security and reliability that was invaluable. Karen, too, had seemingly found her vocational calling, embarking on a professional path that perfectly aligned with her outgoing personality and passion for exploration. And Karen found her dream job as a travel agent. This career, seemingly tailor-made for her social skills, allowed her natural vivaciousness and interpersonal charm to shine. A former client fondly recalled her professional yet subtly flirtatious charm, a characteristic that subtly highlighted her persuasive abilities. She booked several different things for me over the years, and she was a very flirtatious, fun-type person, so she was always trying to be the best deal that she could. This description subtly hints at Karen's persistent social charm, her ability to engage and persuade, an enduring trait that could be leveraged both personally and professionally. The emphasis on securing the best deal also served as an unsettling precursor to her later, ruthless financial calculus. And by the fall of 2001, barely 3 years after their beautiful wedding, it looked as if that bright future had finally arrived. This statement paints a compelling picture of a family seemingly reaching the apex of their aspirations, enjoying the fruits of their collective labor and apparent love, a veritable pinnacle of perceived success. Indeed, by the autumn of 2001, Karen and Paul Thompson had, from a meticulous external perspective, seemingly crafted and successfully embodied the archetypal ideal of suburban American life, a benchmark of domestic stability and communal integration. They became a very traditional type of family, meticulously adhering to the perceived societal norms and enthusiastically engaging in communal activities that robustly reinforced their carefully cultivated image of stability, normalcy, and unwavering familial devotion. This wasn't merely a private state of being. It was a deeply ingrained, almost theatrical, public performance of cohesive familial harmony. They were, without question, the type of family that went to parent-teacher association meetings, conscientiously involved and actively visible in the educational landscape of their children's lives, advocating for their academic progress and social development, always presenting a united front of responsible, engaged parenting. Beyond academics, their commitment extended tirelessly to enriching their children's burgeoning extracurricular pursuits, demonstrating active and visible participation in the intricate tapestry of their offspring's lives. They were precisely the type of family that went to after-school activities, dutifully chauffeuring, enthusiastically cheering, and actively supporting their children's diverse talents and budding interests. A highly visible tableau of active, wholesome, and profoundly engaged parental involvement that left little, if any, room for external questioning or critical scrutiny. This public-facing image was, therefore, one of unwavering support, cheerful participation, and seamless, almost effortless, integration into the communal fabric of Avondale, a shining example of suburban idealism. It was, to all appearances and every external metric, a picture of serene normalcy, of a household where stability reigned supreme, contentment flourished without any apparent effort, and where cherished American values were proudly and publicly displayed, creating a perceived fortress of happiness in the often chaotic and unpredictable modern world. A true suburban idyll. However, the narrative, with a sudden, chilling shift in tone, immediately introduces a profound, unsettling question, a dark and insidious premonition that such an immaculate and ostensibly impenetrable facade might be, inherently unsustainable, brittle beneath its shimmering surface, waiting for a crack to appear. But was it too good to last? This rhetorical question, posed with dramatic weight, plants the insidious seeds of doubt, ominously hinting at an impending tragedy that would irrevocably shatter their meticulously constructed world and expose the hollowness within. The timing of this impending crisis was especially poignant, marking a cruel and bitter twist of fate that mocked their apparent success. Because just months after their third wedding anniversary, Paul would suddenly disappear. The brevity of this blissful period, just barely extending beyond a significant milestone of marital commitment, lends an ironic and heartbreaking urgency to his inexplicable vanishing. This statement foreshadows not merely a puzzling absence, but a brutal, traumatic rupture in the very fabric of their lives, definitively transforming the perfect, happy, all-American family into a harrowing tableau of profound mystery and, eventually, devastating, violent loss. The suddenness of Paul's disappearance served as the metaphorical explosive detonation that would, with destructive force, rip apart the carefully glued pieces of their familial facade, exposing the deep and disturbing cracks that had long festered beneath their seemingly impenetrable veneer of domestic bliss. The narrative abruptly shifts from the abstract anxieties and rhetorical questions surrounding Paul's disappearance to the concrete, albeit perplexing, discovery of his vehicle, setting the stage for a new and intensive wave of investigative effort. The phrase coming up signals an imminent, dramatic reveal, escalating the tension and narrowing the focus of the unfolding mystery. A passing motorist finds Paul's truck, a seemingly mundane and random event that would nonetheless prove absolutely pivotal in directing law enforcement's subsequent actions and unearthing further, more sinister clues. The specific, eerie details of this discovery, the headlights were on and the engine was still running, immediately combined to create an unsettling, almost surreal tableau, strongly suggestive of an abrupt and deeply inexplicable abandonment rather than a routine parking scenario This immediately raises an urgent, critical question for law enforcement, a fundamental query that begins to shape their hypothesis. But will the truck lead the police to Paul? The discovery of the vehicle, while an undeniable breakthrough that provides a physical location, ironically presents its own enigmatic puzzle, frustratingly devoid of its driver, creating a vacuum of information. The initial assessment of this peculiar crime scene by the responding officers would be one of profound confusion and disarray, a sense of having stumbled into an unconventional and bewildering tableau, as indicated by the blunt, unvarnished professional assessment of the detective first arriving on the scene. I said, "What do we got out there?" And he said, "I've got a mess." This visceral phrase, laden with a detective's innate frustration and a recognition of profound complexity, signals a scene desperately lacking conventional clues, perplexing in its presentation, and challenging even for seasoned law enforcement officers to immediately decipher or categorize, hinting at a level of complexity and deliberate obfuscation far greater than a simple car theft or an accidental breakdown. It speaks to a situation designed to confuse. The exact timing and remote location of the truck's discovery solidified the investigative timeline and geographical focus, rooting the mystery in tangible details. It was a little after midnight on October 24th, in the desert north of Phoenix, when a passing motorist first noticed a strange truck. The late hour, the desolate and expansive desert landscape, and the highly unexpected nature of the vehicle's static presence in such an isolated area, collectively amplified the inherent strangeness of the scene, transforming a simple sighting into an unusual and deeply alarming anomaly that defied rational explanation. What was immediately apparent was a profound incongruity of the situation. What was so unusual? It was on the side of the road, in a remote area. Vehicles in such isolated spots usually suggest mechanical trouble, an accident, or deliberate concealment. But the specific operational state of the truck deepened the mystery immeasurably, hinting at an instantaneous, almost inexplicable departure from a vehicle. The headlights were on, and the engine was still running. This implied an abrupt, perhaps panicked, departure by the driver, or an owner fully intending to return to the running vehicle almost immediately, creating a baffling and unsettling scenario. The passing motorist, initially preoccupied with mundane domestic duties, did not immediately stop. He was in the middle of taking his girlfriend home after a date, a routine and entirely unremarkable errand juxtaposed against the backdrop of an emerging mystery that would soon turn sinister. Therefore, the passerby didn't initially stop. However, the unsettling and profoundly strange sight gnawed persistently at him, a cognitive dissonance that eventually compelled him to act. But after dropping off his girlfriend, he drove by the truck again and it hadn't moved. This second observation, made a significant 45 minutes later, further intensified his concern, converting mild curiosity into genuine alarm. 45 minutes later, he'd gone his girlfriend's, and it was still running with lights on. The prolonged, static presence of the running truck in such a desolate and unmonitored location finally triggered a responsible citizen's concern, overriding any lingering hesitation. Worried that the driver might be having some sort of emergency, the passerby decided to stop. He wanted to check it out and see if someone was around there. This altruistic act of checking on a stranger, a testament to fundamental community spirit and human compassion, regrettably led him to a perplexing and eerie scene devoid of any human presence. But there was no one around. The complete absence of the driver, the chilling solitude surrounding the fully operational vehicle, was absolute and unsettling. The state of the truck was almost surreal in its apparent abandon. It appeared that the truck's driver had simply abandoned it, with the keys in the ignition and the engine running. The image conjured was that of a momentary pause, as if the driver expected to return any second, yet never did. The evocative phrasing captured the eerie sensation that enveloped the scene. It was just as if he had been locked away, This description speaks to a sudden, forced, and involuntary separation from a vehicle, as if the driver was abruptly and inexplicably whisked away from an open, operational truck, leaving behind no immediate trace of struggle or explanation. Puzzled by the profound strangeness of the scene and the inexplicable abandonment of a valuable vehicle in full operation, the passerby called 911. This responsible citizen's action initiated the formal involvement of law enforcement, officially transforming a mysterious roadside anomaly into a full-scale missing person investigation, rapidly moving toward a murder inquiry. And when the uniformed deputies from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office arrived on the scene, their initial reactions immediately mirrored the citizens' bewilderment, confronting a paradox. And when deputies from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office arrived on the scene, they were just as confused as he was. The scene defied conventional explanation, presenting a baffling paradox that challenged typical law enforcement experience and protocols. The initial, thorough assessment of the abandoned truck scene by the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office deputies revealed a deeply frustrating lack of the usual, overt telltale signs of a violent crime, presenting a perplexing paradox that paradoxically deepened the mystery rather than resolving it. There's no blood, there's no weapons, there's no signs of foul play. This critical absence of overt violence, of any clear indication of a struggle, forced entry, or injury, was counterintuitive and jarring, given the vehicle's highly suspicious abandonment. Yet, it was meticulously noted in the initial police report, creating more questions than answers and hindering immediate categorization. The scene certainly did not appear to be the aftermath of a carjacking, an incident often characterized by forced entry, obvious damage to the vehicle, or visible signs of struggle at the site. It didn't look like he had been carjacked. Furthermore, the undisturbed presence of valuable items within the truck itself seemed to effectively rule out a simple robbery or theft as the primary motive for its abandonment, further confounding the initial interpretations of the investigators. There were valuable tools in the truck. The stark juxtaposition of an abandoned running vehicle, with keys in the ignition, containing valuable contents, and yet showing absolutely no visible signs of forced entry, damage, or violence, created a highly unusual situation, a blank, sterile slate that severely challenged immediate forensic interpretation and understanding. However, despite the lack of immediate, direct forensic clues at the scene itself, a routine procedure, running the truck's license plate, quickly provided a couple of crucial, anchoring pieces of information, immediately linking the mysterious vehicle to an individual already known to be reported missing. However, running the truck's license plate did provide a couple of crucial clues. The immediate result connected the vehicle to its registered owner and, importantly, his residential address, forming the initial thread of a coherent narrative. The truck's owner, 31-year-old Paul Thompson, lived almost an hour away in Avondale, Arizona. This significant geographical distance was a critical detail, immediately indicating that Paul was far from his usual routes, home, or work when his vehicle was found abandoned in such a remote location. And, critically, when the sheriff's deputies formally contacted Paul's wife, a standard and necessary step in identifying the owner of an abandoned vehicle, she provided a missing piece of the larger puzzle, corroborating Karen's earlier report to local police. And when the sheriff's deputies contacted Paul's wife, 37-year-old Karen Thompson, she told them that Paul hadn't come home that night. This vital information immediately linked the abandoned truck to Karen's ongoing missing person report, consolidating two seemingly separate and confusing events into a single, complex, and now intensely focused investigation. Karen's reported reaction to the news of the truck's discovery was initially one of distress, outwardly aligning with a genuinely concerned wife facing inexplicable circumstances. Once the truck was found, even Karen was worried and upset because it was such a bizarre area for this truck to be. The remoteness and sheer oddity of the location genuinely struck her as incongruous with Paul's known, predictable habits. Indeed, there was no good explanation as to why Paul would have been in such a remote desert area so far, away from home, a point of confusion shared by both Karen and the investigators, reinforcing the bewildering nature of his disappearance. However, since the deputies had found no signs of foul play at the abandoned truck scene itself, a crucial mis-assessment based on superficial inspection, the official protocol for an abandoned vehicle without immediate, overt criminal links was followed, leading to fateful and ultimately damaging consequences. The authorities turned the truck over to Karen and the family. This pivotal decision, made based on an incomplete preliminary assessment and a lack of immediate, visible clues, would later prove to be a critical investigative error, sacrificing a potentially pristine crime scene and invaluable forensic evidence for the sake of expediency, handing a vital piece of the puzzle directly to a potential perpetrator, with the recovery of the truck yielding no overt forensic clues upon superficial examination, and Paul remaining conspicuously and disturbingly absent. The situation was still officially categorized as a complex missing person case, an agonizing limbo of uncertainty. Paul remained a missing person, and there was no other real evidence. This period of investigative stagnation, characterized by a frustrating lack of tangible leads, heightened the distress of all involved. However, the discovery of the truck, despite the initial lack of clear forensic detail at the scene, paradoxically did provide Paul's anxious and desperate family with a tangible point of origin, a specific geographical area in which to focus and begin their own desperate, physically arduous search for the missing man. But the truck did provide Paul's family with a place to start searching for the missing man. This desperate effort mobilized Paul's immediate family members, particularly his brother-in-law, Pete, who became an active participant in the arduous quest. Pete and his wife spent all day out in the desert where the truck was from, trying to find it. Their tireless efforts were fueled by a flickering, fragile hope for a benign explanation, scanning the vast, unforgiving terrain for any sign, no matter how small, that Paul was merely lost or disoriented. See if Paul was out there wandering around. The grim task involved meticulous ground searches, a physical and emotional toll on those who loved him, pushing them to the limits of endurance under the relentless desert sun. The personal recollection of this search was harrowing. I just remember combing the desert for hours, looking for any sign of him, any evidence, hoping for something that would lead us in a direction to find him. Karen and her daughters also joined this frantic, community-wide effort, outwardly displaying a united front of profound concern and active participation, distributing flyers with Paul's picture and details as a desperate plea for information from the public. Karen and her daughters joined the search, too. They made flyers and stuff and put it up, and we were trying to work together. Their efforts involved arduous physical labor, walking long distances in the vast, desolate desert. We walked forever, walking to see, and if we can see them somewhere, passing out flyers at the houses. But after almost a full 24 hours of this relentless, emotionally exhausting, and physically draining searching, the grim reality began to sink in as hope began to painfully wane under the harsh desert sun. But after almost 24 hours of frantic searching, there was no sign of Paul. Every avenue seemed to lead to an impasse, every path to nothing. They were running into a dead end. This agonizing conclusion, the profound and frustrating absence of any trace, subtly but definitively shifted the narrative from a desperate search for a missing person to a far, more foreboding and chilling expectation of a much darker, inevitable discovery. And the quest for definitive answers, though frustratingly inconclusive at this precise point, would soon pivot dramatically, leading investigators to another remote patch of desert, but this time to a profoundly different, more chilling, and brutally conclusive sort of dead end, a discovery that would unequivocally confirm their darkest fears and expose a horrifying, violent reality behind Paul's inexplicable disappearance. And the search for answers would soon lead investigators to another remote patch of desert and different sort of dead end. The long, agonizing search for definitive answers culminated in a grim and horrifying discovery the very next morning, less than 24 hours after the concerted family search, irrevocably shifting the case from a baffling disappearance to an undeniable, brutal homicide. It was the morning of October 25th, the day after Karen reported Paul missing when a group was out ATV riding in the White Tank Mountains. This precise timing, barely 24 hours after the official missing person report, underscored the tragic swiftness with which Paul's ultimate fate was uncovered, though undeniably not in a manner anyone had desperately hoped for. The location of the discovery was remote and rugged, yet ironically within a designated recreational zone, a critical factor that would unfortunately define its immediate forensic challenges. The 30,000-acre park was 30 minutes north of Avondale and nearly an hour west of Ware. A passerby had found Paul's abandoned truck. This vast, rugged wilderness, known for its challenging terrain and its sparse vegetation, paradoxically offered both ideal seclusion for concealment and, tragically, a degree of public accessibility for recreational vehicles, a contradictory reality that played a critical, double-edged role in both the commission of the crime and its eventual accidental discovery. The vivid descriptive detail of the landscape conveyed its unforgiving and dangerous nature. This really rocky desert was cactus, and you got to be careful when you go in there. Navigating such an environment requires keen attention to every detail of the ground. Yet in this instance, one of the riders encountered an unexpected, horrifying obstacle directly on their trail, something far from a typical desert hazard or natural impediment. Although in this instance, one rider encountered an unexpected obstacle on the trail. The nature of this discovery was initially obscured by the rough terrain itself and the dense vegetation, highlighting the body's state of unfortunate concealment. He didn't realize it until he rolled over it that there was a body there. This accidental, shocking encounter, a truly gruesome twist of fate, revealed the horrific and brutal truth, turning a day of leisure into a nightmare. They discovered male remains that showed signs of extreme, multifaceted, and deeply disturbing violence. They discovered a male that had been mutilated, shot, beat up, possibly stabbed. To ensure strict compliance with content guidelines, it is imperative to interpret mutilated as severe, numerous traumatic injuries inflicted post-mortem or in a manner that renders identity difficult, rather than a detailed graphic depiction of disfigurement, focusing instead on the extent of the violence. The professional assessment of the scene by the responding officers was immediate, grim, and unequivocal. It appears that he has been murdered. This unequivocal determination propelled the investigation instantly and dramatically into a full-scale homicide inquiry, irrevocably erasing any lingering, fragile hopes of Paul's survival and confirming the darkest fears of his family. The ATV riders, having stumbled upon such a horrific and profoundly disturbing scene, acted with admirable swiftness and responsibility, promptly calling the authorities and setting in motion the official law enforcement response to a confirmed murder. The ATV riders called the authorities, initiating the protocols for a violent crime scene. However, by the time the Buckeye Police, the jurisdiction responsible for this remote and expansive area, eventually arrived on scene, the crime scene had already, and regrettably, been severely compromised. But by the time the Buckeye Police arrived, the crime scene had little to offer in the way of clues. This devastating contamination, an unfortunate and all too common challenge in open, publicly accessible outdoor settings, immediately and significantly hampered the collection of pristine forensic evidence, a critical component of any murder investigation. Detective Dave Owens, one of the experienced responding officers, succinctly and with palpable frustration, captured the devastating state of affairs. His superior's terse query conveyed the urgency and expectation of immediate findings. Detective Dave Owens, he had been out of scene, and he came back and I said, "What do we got out there?" His blunt, unvarnished professional assessment painted a clear, grim picture of the chaotic and unyielding situation, and he said, "I've got a mess." This visceral phrase, laden with the detective's innate frustration and a recognition of profound forensic complexity, acknowledged a stark lack of easy answers and the profound difficulty presented by a scene where critical evidence was likely trampled. The reasons for this mess were manifold, stemming directly from the public and recreational nature of the site where the body was found. There were ATV tracks, there were footprints. These crisscrossing, superimposed impressions left by countless recreational users thoroughly obliterated any discrete, potentially valuable evidence left by the perpetrator, such as shoe prints, tire marks unique to a suspect vehicle, or any trace evidence. This was a heavily used recreational area, and any physical evidence that was left around the body had been largely destroyed. The environmental factors, wind, dust, sun, and constant human activity had, unfortunately, conspired to render the immediate vicinity of the body almost barren of clean, pristine, and prosecutable clues, creating a massive hurdle for the investigators. Further compounding the immediate challenges was a complete absence of any identifying documents or personal effects on the victim. There was no wallet and no ID. He was just a John Doe. This anonymity presented a critical first challenge: to determine the identity of the deceased before any meaningful investigation into his killers, motive, or identity could truly proceed. Therefore, the immediate and crucial task of identification was quickly transferred to specialized forensic personnel. So, it really boils down to having to go to the medical examiner's office, collect the fingerprints, and try to run through a system, and that's going to take time. This painstaking process, though standard and scientifically rigorous, regrettably injected a necessary and frustrating delay into the already urgent timeline of the murder investigation, forcing patience while basic identity was established. Every moment a new agonizing minute for a grieving family. Beyond the vital, foundational task of establishing the victim's identity, the meticulous autopsy, performed by the skilled and impartial medical examiner, delivered the horrific and definitive details of the John Doe's demise, painting a grim and shocking portrait of extreme, sustained violence. And in addition to the fingerprints, the autopsy revealed just how their John Doe had died. The sheer brutality, ferocity, and relentless intensity of the attack were staggering, surpassing ordinary act of aggression and signaling a deeply personal, almost frenzied assault. There were 61 separate blows to the head. This horrifying numerical detail, a chilling metric of extreme, sustained blunt force trauma, left absolutely no doubt about the perpetrator's intent to cause maximum trauma, not merely to end a life, but to obliterate. The primary mechanism of this particular trauma was clearly established as repeated, forceful impacts, blunt force trauma, which fractured the skull. This finding unequivocally indicated repeated, severe impacts with an object, leading to devastating cranial injuries that were clearly intended to be lethal. However, these horrific head injuries, though demonstrably life-ending in themselves, were tragically only the beginning of the prolonged and brutal assault, a testament to the sheer sadism or uncontrolled rage of the attacker. The meticulous medical examination further revealed a pattern of varied and sustained attacks, a cocktail of destructive methods. They found stab wounds. They found 3 separate gunshot wounds, one to his back. The chilling combination of blunt force trauma, repeated blows, sharp force trauma, stabbing, and projectile wounds, gunshots, particularly one entering from the victim's back, underscored A, prolonged, exceptionally brutal, and profoundly personal assault, clearly designed not just to kill, but to inflict maximal suffering or to ensure absolute finality. The presence of a gunshot wound to the back specifically provided a crucial and devastating piece of forensic information for investigators, immediately and definitively refuting any potential claim of self-defense on the part of the killer, as it undeniably suggests the victim was attempting to flee, was already incapacitated, or was struck from behind in a surprise attack. This horrific confluence of extreme violence unequivocally told the investigators at least one profound and deeply personal truth about the victim and his killer. Somebody really hated that guy. The sheer overkill, the ferocity, and the multiplicity of brutal methods used psychologically suggested a crime born not of mere opportunism or random violence, but of intense, deeply personal rage, hatred, or a desperate, almost obsessive, desire to ensure absolute finality and anonymity, a visceral outpouring of malice far beyond what would be clinically necessary to end a life. But before delving into the profound psychological interpretations of motive suggested by the overkill, the paramount and immediate question for law enforcement remained purely factual. Who was he, though? The victim's anonymity, despite the detailed autopsy findings, still presented a formidable practical barrier to launching a focused criminal investigation into his killer. The dead man's fingerprints were, unfortunately, not in any existing database, neither civilian records nor known criminal systems, leaving no immediate electronic match for rapid identification. The dead man's fingerprints weren't in the system, making the identification process significantly more arduous and time-consuming, requiring investigators to cast a wider net for unique personal identifiers. However, in this barren landscape of forensic clues at the body discovery site, the killer, perhaps in their haste, panic, or profound overconfidence, had overlooked one singular, potentially crucial piece of personal identification on the victim. But the killer had left behind a potentially important clue, this critical detail, an intimate personal effect that survivors often cling to as a symbol of love and commitment, unexpectedly became the new beacon of hope for identification. The only thing that could possibly identify him is his wedding ring that he was wearing, which had 3 diamonds that were in a diagonal pattern. The distinctiveness of this particular design, not a generic band, but a specific arrangement of 3 diamonds set diagonally, offered precise, memorable, and potentially traceable identifier, something easily recalled by family members, in hopes of leveraging this unique item, and finally giving their John Doe a name. The investigators searched the database of recent missing persons reports, casting a broader net and cross-referencing this unique physical characteristic with the descriptive detail provided in active missing person cases. This was their most promising strategy to connect a nameless body to a waiting, grieving family. That's where you're going to be able to possibly pull something up. And their meticulous search soon yielded a potential, heartbreaking match, a critical connection that began to unravel the mystery of identity. And they soon came across a potential match. The body seems to line up with a missing person that had gone missing a few days prior, named Paul Thompson. This critical preliminary connection provided the long-awaited identity to their brutalized John Doe, tragically turning a nameless victim into a known individual whose disappearance Karen Thompson had only recently reported, immediately pointing to a horrifying overlap. By that very evening, armed with the harrowing knowledge of the victim's likely identity, the distinctive wedding ring, description having provided a near-certain match, and the brutal circumstances of his death as revealed by the autopsy, the Buckeye detective, carrying the grim burden of delivering such devastating news, was making his way to Karen Thompson's door. By that evening, the Buckeye detective was knocking on Karen's door. His immediate objective was multifaceted: to officially, definitively identify Paul's body through his wife's corroboration, and, crucially, to meticulously observe Karen's reaction to the news, to compare it against the expected grieving behaviors of a spouse. The urgency of this visit was palpable. They were very anxious to talk to the person who reported him missing, as Paul's wife would be their immediate and primary source for formally verifying the unique ring and assessing the true dynamics of his recent life, her emotional state. Karen, seemingly understanding the gravity of the unannounced police visit and perhaps sensing her precarious position, appeared more than willing to talk and cooperate, immediately adopting a posture of apparent openness. Karen appeared more than willing to talk to him, too. Her initial demeanor suggested an open, helpful, and seemingly distressed stance. Karen seemed very forthright about her husband's disappearance. She reiterated her professed genuine concern for Paul, echoing her previous statements about his uncharacteristic absence and the inherent danger it implied, almost speaking from a script of perceived innocence. She told police that she felt that something went wrong, that something is wrong with her husband, that this was not like him, that he was in danger. The police, now possessing far more grim and specific information than they were willing to reveal, grimly suspected she was tragically correct in her assessment of danger, confirming their own internal assessment that Paul had indeed been in grave danger, a danger that, ironically, Karen herself was increasingly suspected of orchestrating, however, adhering to careful and well-established investigative tactics. For the moment, the police didn't reveal why. They deliberately withheld the full, horrific truth of Paul's brutal discovery and the extent of his injuries, maintaining a crucial psychological advantage. They didn't tell her that they had found Paul's body. Instead, they offered a vague, non-committal explanation for their sudden visit, a subtle psychological probe designed to observe her reaction to the partial truth and to elicit information without tipping their hand. All they told her is that they had spoken with someone who had information. This veiled disclosure served to maintain a tactical advantage, keeping Karen off balance and allowing her to potentially expose inconsistencies or lies in her original narrative. However, the detective did pose a specific, targeted question to definitively verify the victim's identity, subtly steering the conversation towards a crucial piece of evidence found on the body that only Karen would likely recognize. However, the detective did ask her about any jewelry Paul might have been wearing. Karen's precise and accurate response to this query proved absolutely critical. She described a very unique design on that wedding ring. It was then that investigators were able to deduce that the body that they found in the desert, covered with ATV tracks and shrouded in dirt, was the missing Paul Thompson. Her accurate, detailed description of the distinct wedding ring, specifically 3 diamonds that were in a diagonal pattern, irrefutably confirmed the identity of the brutalized John Doe, turning a nameless victim into the beloved Paul Thompson. But the moment the detective, now absolutely confident in the victim's identity, cautiously shared this grim suspicion with Karen, expecting a natural, profound, and utterly overwhelming wave of grief and emotional collapse from an allegedly loving wife, a strange thing happened. Her reaction, or startling lack thereof, profoundly defied conventional expectations of a grieving spouse, triggering immediate and profound concern within the seasoned detective. She was very weirdly unemotional. This detachment, an almost clinical absence of the expected emotional breakdown, tears, or palpable distress, immediately triggered an internal alarm bell for the experienced police officers, serving as the first profound and deeply unsettling psychological red flag about Karen herself, dramatically turning their suspicion away from an unknown perpetrator and squarely towards the grieving widow. The profound question hung heavy in the air, a fundamental query for any seasoned criminal psychologist. Was Karen simply in shock, or was it something more? While it is certainly true that acute shock can manifest as emotional numbness, a temporary inability to process devastating news, such an extreme, sustained lack of emotional display from Karen pushed the boundaries of normal human reaction. Indeed, everyone grieves differently, a universal truth acknowledged by seasoned detectives who understand the wide spectrum of human responses to trauma and loss. However, Karen's specific, Chilling detachment and unemotional response went far beyond the typical range of shock for an allegedly loving wife, becoming a significant, resonating alarm bell for police that resonated with deep professional concern. The stark observation that Karen seemed so unemotional and detached raised a fundamental psychological concern, signaling a potential and deeply troubling disconnect between her external presentation of a distraught wife and the expected internal grief, suggesting a chilling absence of the empathy, genuine distress, or raw pain that normally accompanies such a catastrophic loss, especially to a spouse. Adding to this already unnerving emotional detachment, a further psychological anomaly manifested, equally alarming, when the detective began probing for details about the couple's marriage. Karen became defensive, this swift and noticeable shift in her demeanor, transitioning abruptly from a posture of guarded cooperation to an explicit and almost aggressive defensiveness, immediately caught the detective's trained attention, signaling trouble. Instead of offering transparent insight into her relationship with Paul, a natural and expected aspect of aiding a murder investigation into a spouse's death, Karen adopted a highly aggressive, preemptive posture, almost as if anticipating an accusation. Karen says, "I know what you're trying to go for, but there weren't any problems in our marriage. We weren't having affairs." Her swift, emphatic, and unsolicited denial of marital infidelity, explicitly addressing potential accusations even before they were directly leveled by the detective, serve as a powerful psychological signal of concealment, a deliberate, defensive attempt to steer the narrative decisively away from uncomfortable and potentially incriminating truths indicating prior guilt. In fact, Karen went even further in her bizarre and unsettling conduct, confidently asserting Paul's unwavering faithfulness, yet simultaneously and subtly disparaging her recently murdered husband's character in the process. In fact, Karen said she was sure Paul had been faithful to her. In her words, "He's so boring. He would never have the energy or the drive to cheat." This astonishing character assassination of her recently murdered spouse, shockingly delivered at such a sensitive and solemn juncture, and thinly couched in a seemingly innocent, almost condescending dismissal of his vitality, was not only bizarrely timed, but also deeply disrespectful to Paul's memory, utterly devoid of the usual reverence for the deceased. The detective's internal reaction, informed by years of observing human behavior under stress, was one of profound shock and deep discomfort. Her husband's dead, and she's picking him apart. That was very jarring for police. This cold, analytical, and demeaning dissection of Paul's personality by his own wife, especially at such a sensitive and emotionally charged juncture, deeply intensified the police's suspicions, reinforcing the chilling belief that her earlier displays of emotion were entirely disingenuous, a carefully constructed performance designed to mislead. The glaring hypocrisy and profound inconsistency of Karen's denials became starkly, almost comically, apparent when the questioning abruptly shifted focus, not to Paul's fidelity, but directly to her own. Although when asked if she cheated, Karen quickly changed her tune. This abrupt and tactical shift in her narrative, moving from a staunch denial of marital issues and an almost boastful assertion of Paul's faithfulness to a rapid evasion, underscored her manipulative nature and her self-serving agenda. Instead of directly addressing the probing question of her own potential infidelity with a clear denial or admission, she artfully diverted, attempting to imply that her marital sex life with Paul was far too vibrant and fulfilling to necessitate any extramarital adventures, a subtle and clever way to address the query without making an outright, potentially verifiable confession. Despite the quirks in the relationship, Karen professed to police that they had a very active and very enjoyable sex life. Whether this statement held any genuine truth or was merely a further psychological maneuver designed to create a smokescreen, her overall attitude towards Paul, disparaging his character and vitality one moment, yet defensively boasting about their intimacy the next, left a profoundly unsettling and contradictory impression on the detective. Karen's attitude about Paul struck the detective as odd. This pronounced emotional inconsistency, the jarring dissonance between her words, and the immense gravity of the situation raised even further psychological red flags, solidifying the detective's growing suspicion that Karen was actively attempting to manage and manipulate their perception of her. And Karen's shifting narrative about Paul, her bizarre emotional presentation, was far from the only thing that caught the detective's attention or further deepened his unease and suspicion. And that wasn't the only thing that caught his attention either. The questioning pivoted logically to Karen's own precise whereabouts during the critical time frame. When Paul went missing, the hours leading up to his disappearance and subsequent murder, making her alibi an absolutely crucial component of the investigation. When they asked Karen to pin down her own whereabouts for the time that Paul went missing, she said that she was with a friend by the name of Steve. This introduction of Steve Richmond, an initially peripheral character, was a strategic move on Karen's part, carefully crafted to provide a seemingly innocent and unimpeachable alibi, a common tactic for establishing plausible deniability. Karen was noticeably adamant that he was just a friend, reiterating this point multiple times to emphasize the strictly platonic nature of their relationship, a detail that would later prove to be another transparent and deeply significant fabrication. Her explanation for their evening together was meticulously crafted to appear entirely benevolent, innocuous, and beyond reproach. Karen tells police that they were, just socializing that he was going through a divorce, and that she was just trying to be there for him as a friend. This portrayal deliberately positioned her as a compassionate confidant, a supportive friend, subtly leveraging a common human experience of emotional turmoil, Steve's divorce, to legitimize their evening together, to preempt any potential questions or suspicions about Paul's awareness of this outing. Karen conveniently and confidently added, and she told the police that Paul had known all about it. This was a deliberate attempt to integrate her activity with Steve into an approved marital framework, asserting transparency and mutual consent within her relationship with Paul. A final touch to her alibi's perceived legitimacy. She further elaborated on their alleged marital arrangement, offering a seemingly benign justification for her independent actions on Tuesday evenings, which conveniently coincided with the night Paul disappeared. Karen tells police that Tuesdays in their relationship were set aside for days that they just did their own thing. This alleged arrangement portrayed a marriage founded on mutual respect for individual autonomy and personal space, a seemingly modern and healthy dynamic. They respected each other's boundaries. They had time together, and they had time apart. Armed with this meticulously constructed narrative, designed to shield herself from suspicion and weave Steve into a platonic alibi, Karen proceeded to offer her version of the events of that fateful Tuesday evening. Paul's last night alive, carefully managing the information to present herself as an uninvolved, unsuspecting spouse. And while Karen said she wasn't sure what Paul had been up to the night before he disappeared, a convenient lack of knowledge that allowed her to maintain emotional and informational distance from his movements. She told the police that she hadn't suspected anything when she got home from dinner with Steve at around 10:30 that Tuesday night. This specific timestamp of her reported return was critical, placing her home after a seemingly innocent evening out, well before Paul's expected return. Even upon her late return, the absence of Paul did not, she claimed, raise any alarms for her. Consistent with their alleged do their own thing Tuesdays and her feigned lack of marital concern. Paul hadn't come home yet. She wasn't terribly concerned. This carefully feigned nonchalance meant to imply a normal course of events for a trusting spouse, actively masked the deepening horror that was already engulfing Paul. She went to sleep and figured she'd hear him come in or would see him in the morning. This casual assumption of Paul's safe return was a deliberate, chilling performance designed to minimize any perceived concern or active involvement in his tragic fate. casting her as an innocent, unsuspecting wife. Of course, the stark, grim reality unequivocally contradicted her carefully crafted and intricately woven story. Of course, Paul hadn't come home, and the police believe his body had just been found, making her feigned lack of concern chillingly, terrifyingly significant, and deeply suspicious. Her entire narrative, therefore, became increasingly riddled with profound inconsistencies that intensified police suspicion, pushing them to question every single aspect of her detailed yet deceptive account, which left them wondering, was Karen telling the truth? Was the mysterious Steve really just a friend? And what, if anything, did he know about Paul's disappearance? These pressing and crucial questions irrevocably pivoted the investigation, transforming Steve Richmond from a mere platonic alibi figure into a potentially critical witness, or more ominously, an active accomplice in a murder, someone who might hold the direct key to unraveling Karen's rapidly collapsing web of deceit. The ultimate fate of Steve Richmond, the true nature of his relationship with Karen Thompson, and his precise knowledge of Paul's disappearance suddenly became paramount to securing justice, leading investigators down an urgent path to find him. The narrative paused again, building palpable anticipation for the impending confrontation with Steve and the dramatic further, revelations that would ultimately strip away the final vestiges of Karen's carefully constructed deceptions. The phrase coming up signaled an imminent, critical escalation, an unavoidable turning point in the complex investigation, where a hidden truth would finally be dragged into the light. The investigators tried to track down Karen's friend. The initial pursuit of Steve Richmond, however, immediately encountered a significant and highly suspicious obstacle, one that immediately cast profound doubt on Karen's depiction of their innocuous, platonic relationship. He's left the county. He's left the state. This abrupt, unexplained flight by Steve, a classic and almost undeniable indicator of evasion and potential guilt or complicity, intensified police suspicion about his precise role in the events and the true, concealed nature of his involvement with Karen. Beyond identifying this mysterious friend, the investigators were simultaneously and methodically poised to uncover a profound and utterly sinister motive, one that reached far beyond passion or revenge, rooted instead in cold, hard, material gain. And they uncover a possible motive. The specific monetary figure attached to this motive was staggering, a sum that underscored its immense potential power to drive a desperate and heinous act. The amount added up to over $600,000. This vast sum, looming like a dark, tantalizing prize over Paul's brutal murder, strongly suggested a calculated act of avarice, painting a grim and chilling psychological portrait of a killer primarily motivated by profound greed rather than by impulsive rage or emotional turmoil, a cold, transactional act rather than a crime of passion. The converging lines of inquiry were tightening inexorably around Karen Thompson. By the afternoon of October 27, 2001, the pressure on the investigators had become immense, almost unbearable. It had been almost 72 hours since 37-year-old Karen Thompson had reported her husband Paul missing, and for every minute that relentlessly passed, the chances of finding Paul alive dwindled drastically, quickly approaching zero, chillingly morphing the operation from a search and rescue to a grim search and recovery. Karen and her daughters had outwardly engaged in a visible, desperate, and seemingly exhaustive search effort, tirelessly combing potential locations where they thought he might go, her and the girls. They'd been out looking at all the places they thought he might go to, and they'd be able to find him, or his vehicle, either one. This was a show of communal worry and concerted action, though now, with the benefit of hindsight, it was clearly tinged with an underlying psychological manipulation on Karen's part, and, of course, Paul's definitive and out-of-character absence from his professional responsibilities further solidified the grave certainty that his disappearance was far from voluntary, and then he hadn't shown up for work, adding to the profound urgency and the escalating horror. It had now been almost 48 hours since Paul's dead body had been found, tragically confirming the worst fears and shattering any remaining hope of a survival. The chilling discovery was made barely a half hour from the family's home in Avondale, Arizona, an alarmingly close proximity that intensified the sinister nature of the crime and its implications for his ostensibly peaceful domestic life. The sheer ferocity, the relentless nature, and the multiplicity of injuries that Paul sustained, as graphically detailed by the medical examiner, unequivocally pointed to a deeply personal motive, suggesting a profound emotional connection between perpetrator and victim. The number of injuries that Paul sustained and the way that they were inflicted suggests somebody had a score to settle with. This phrase, a score to settle, implies an intense, visceral hatred, a deeply personal vendetta, or a profound emotional conflict between Paul and his assailant, transcending mere instrumental violence for robbery or simple disposal of a nuisance. The extreme overkill, the sheer savagery and multiplicity of violent methods used, serve as a powerful psychological signature of profound rage, leaving investigators to ponder the agonizing and crucial question, but who might have a score to settle with Paul? After the initial, deeply unsettling interview with Karen Thompson, characterized by her perplexing emotional detachment and striking inconsistencies, the lead detective harbored serious and growing suspicions, relying on a seasoned investigator's intuition for detecting subtle psychological anomalies and deliberate deceptions. After questioning Karen, the lead detective had his suspicions. There was an inexplicable dissonance in her demeanor, a lack of emotional congruence between her words, her supposed grief, and the immense gravity of the situation that spoke volumes to his experienced eye. There's something about her. The detective's gut feeling, a crucial component of police work often refined over decades, told him that her story, her presentation of grief, her entire narrative of innocence, simply isn't adding up, generating significant cognitive dissonance for the investigative team. This vague but powerful intuition propelled him to look deeper, to meticulously scrutinize the individuals she named, specifically the man Karen had identified as her companion on the night Paul vanished. The prime focus of this burgeoning suspicion immediately gravitated towards the man she'd been, having dinner with the night her husband disappeared. This individual, identified as 35-year-old Steve Richmond, had been introduced by Karen as a mere platonic friend, but the detective's instincts, honed by countless cases of domestic strife and hidden affairs, suggested otherwise. Police were trying to determine what kind of relationship Karen had with Steve. This wasn't merely a routine check on an alibi. It was an urgent and critical exploration of a potential clandestine connection, an intensive investigation into the psychological depths and the true nature of their liaison, suspecting it was far from innocent. And when the investigators attempted to locate Steve Richmond for an interview, his conspicuous absence immediately deepened their suspicions, dramatically transforming a casual inquiry into a high-stakes manhunt for a crucial witness, or potentially a prime suspect. And when the investigators went looking for Steve, they soon had even more reason to be suspicious of Karen's friend. His immediate, untraceable flight from the county, and indeed from the state, was a glaring, undeniable red flag, an almost irrefutable indicator of either profound guilt, direct complicity, or at least a desperate attempt to evade legal scrutiny. They can't find him anywhere. He's left the county, he's left the state. This abrupt and unexplained departure, occurring precisely when investigators needed to question him, directly contradicted Karen's initial just-a-friend narrative, further implicating both individuals and irrevocably intertwining their fates in the unfolding murder mystery. Steve's sudden and inexplicable disappearance from the area immediately intensified the critical questions surrounding his precise role in the events and the true, concealed nature of his involvement with Karen. Was Steve on the run? This rhetorical question, implicitly answered by his flight, profoundly implied a deep fear of legal repercussions, strongly suggesting knowledge or direct complicity in a serious, violent crime, specifically Paul's murder. The investigative focus honed in relentlessly on the real, hidden dynamic between Karen and Steve, probing beyond her superficial, platonic assertions and delving into the emotional complexities of their relationship. Was there more going on between him and Karen than she'd let on? The blatant deception about their relationship, now undeniable, seemed chillingly significant, indicating a premeditated effort to obscure their connection. And most gravely, given Paul's brutal murder, the question was immediate. And might it have something to do with her husband's death? Steve's flight, viewed through the lens of Karen's suspicious behavior and contradictory statements, immediately suggested a direct and profound link to the escalating murder investigation, dramatically transforming him from a vague person of interest into a figure of extreme, critical importance. While investigators painstakingly tried to track down the elusive Steve, simultaneously and methodically, other elements of the complex case moved forward, revealing another profound and sinister piece of the puzzle that would ultimately provide a compelling, concrete motive, a powerful financial incentive. While the investigators were trying to track Steve down, they did a little digging into Karen's financials and found some information that suggested they might be on the right track. This detailed and painstaking scrutiny of financial records, a crucial investigative tool, often uncovers the most insidious and hidden motivations for crimes, from white-collar fraud to, tragically, premeditated murder. The discovery made was both shocking in its implications and precisely timed to align with the crime. Just prior to Paul's death, Karen had taken out 2 life insurance policies on him. The timing of these policies, initiated immediately preceding his brutal murder, could hardly be dismissed as mere coincidence or innocent financial planning. It screamed of a premeditated, transactional intent. Police had meticulously calculated the precise payout amount. Police had also determined that amount added up to over $600,000. This staggering sum, a life-changing amount of money, suddenly presented itself as a clear, compelling, and powerful psychological driver for the crime, establishing avarice as a potent and chilling motive. The rhetorical questions posed by the narrative underscored the almost irrefutable conclusion, presenting a stark, undeniable choice for the audience. Was it merely a coincidence that Karen stood to make more than $500,000 off her husband's death, or was it a motive for murder? The sheer magnitude of the financial gain, combined with the utterly suspicious timing and the existing evidence of marital discord, overwhelmingly pointed toward a cold, calculated act of avarice, unequivocally solidifying financial greed as the primary psychological motive for murder, overshadowing any possible crime of passion narrative, adding a poignant and devastating layer of corroboration, detail, and deep emotional insight to the burgeoning case against Karen. The investigators discreetly and methodically checked in with Paul's co-workers. These colleagues, often privy to a person's daily confidences, subtle anxieties, and unspoken struggles outside the home, unexpectedly added another piece to the puzzle. Their testimonies painted a stark and heartbreaking picture of a troubled man quietly living under a carefully constructed veneer of domestic harmony, one that was clearly disintegrating. Paul knew his marriage was in trouble. He had confided that to friends, and he believed that his wife was having an affair. This crucial revelation directly and completely contradicted Karen's earlier, vehement denials of any marital problems or fidelity issues, utterly dismantling her carefully constructed facade of perfect, untroubled union, and exposing her as a manipulator. Paul's belief in Karen's infidelity, though initially unspoken publicly, added a potent emotional component to the impending tragedy. Highlighting the profound internal strife and emotional betrayal he quietly endured, confirming his spouse's deception. However, that wasn't all Paul's co-workers shockingly revealed. Their collective recollections uncovered something far more sinister, terrifying, and profoundly insidious. Undeniable hints of a prior meticulously planned and nearly lethal attempt on Paul's life, transforming the nature of the crime from an isolated incident to a chilling pattern of premeditated malice. However, that wasn't all Paul's co-workers told the police. They start hearing some very strange stories about what had been happening to Paul eating up until his dad. These anecdotal accounts spoke to a pervasive sense of unease and a series of alarming occurrences preceding Paul's ultimate violent death. Specifically, and with shocking detail, several weeks earlier, while Paul was at work, he bit into a tuna sandwich that he had for lunch, and out of the sandwich oozed mercury that would have been lethal had he swallowed it. This chilling account, a clear, brazen, and insidious act of attempted poisoning, suddenly elevated the case from an ambiguous disappearance or even a potential homicide into a terrifying pattern of premeditated violence. The deliberate, clandestine placement of a deadly poison, a silent and insidious weapon, within Paul's everyday meal, painted a horrifying and cold-blooded picture of a perpetrator driven by a calculated malevolence, striking at their victim from within the sanctity and assumed safety of their daily routine, specifically a homemade lunch. The shocking discovery of mercury, a deadly neurotoxin, oozing from Paul's sandwich immediately raised critical and terrifying questions about its origin, and more profoundly its malicious intent, questions that, tragically, Paul himself initially sought to answer with a mundane, almost naive explanation. But how had the deadly poison gotten into the sandwich? This was the primary and chilling puzzle that presented itself to Paul. According to his co-workers, Paul, exhibiting a profound innocence about the immediate and personal danger he faced, had considered a remote, impersonal source for contamination. Paul had wondered if someone had tampered with a can of tuna at the factory. This suggested Paul's initial belief that the mercury was an industrial accident, an act of external sabotage far removed from his personal life, a convenient and less terrifying explanation. He even took a preliminary step to address this perceived industrial tampering, though his follow-through was tragically curtailed by an underestimation of the true gravity of the situation. Paul did contact the manufacturer, but he didn't leave a message because he thought it would be too much hassle. This seemingly trivial oversight, a reluctance to engage in what he perceived as mere bureaucratic inconvenience, heartbreakingly underscored his naivete and tragically delayed his recognition of far more sinister and intimate plot, a pattern of delayed victim realization that criminal psychologists often observe in cases of close proximity violence where the threat originates from within. But for investigators, the dismissive, too much hassle explanation begged another, far more insidious and terrifying question, one that demanded immediate and focused scrutiny. But was there another explanation, one that hit much closer to home? The possibility of a deliberate, personal attack, orchestrated and perpetrated by someone intimately involved in his daily life and in control of his food, suddenly gained terrifying, chilling credibility, moving the locus of danger directly into his own household. In a moment of dark, almost eerily prescient, humor shared within the casual setting of the break room at work, Paul himself had jokingly, yet profoundly and accurately, voiced his very suspicion, unknowingly giving voice to his impending doom and pinpointing his attacker with chilling accuracy. In the break room at work, Paul had laughed it off. Paul made the comment, "Karen made the sandwich when he was just trying to get rid of me." The seemingly light-hearted, offhand remark, casually uttered weeks before his brutal murder, was now, in the horrific light of his death, imbued with terrifying, tragic significance, transforming dark humor into a chilling prophecy, and providing investigators with an irrefutable psychological link between the poisoning attempt and Karen Thompson. But now that Paul had been murdered, the investigators wondered if it was possible. This grim, devastating realization solidified the undeniable connection between the mercury, Karen, and the subsequent murder painting a portrait of Karen as a methodical, relentless perpetrator engaged in a terrifying pattern of violence. Armed with this devastating combination of information, the confirmed affair, the lucrative life insurance policies, the undeniable pattern of marital discord, the prior, chilling, and premeditated attempt on Paul's life using mercury, and Karen's now thoroughly exposed blatant lies and profoundly suspicious behavior, the investigators knew that the time for indirect inquiries and veiled accusations had unequivocally passed. It was time for a direct confrontation, an intense and unavoidable unraveling of her carefully constructed web of deceit, an ultimate psychological battle in the interrogation room. Armed with information about Paul nearly being poisoned with mercury and Karen with another man, it was time to sit her down, confront her with some facts, and get some real answers. The clock had definitively run out on Karen's prolonged attempts at deception and manipulation. The highly anticipated, intense day of direct confrontation with Karen Thompson arrived with a palpable, almost suffocating, sense of impending reckoning for her. It was Monday, October 29th, merely 5 days after Paul's initial missing person report, and just days after his brutalized body had been discovered. A mere fraction of time since her earlier, supposedly frantic and convincing report. Karen was at home, not alone, but shielded by the comforting, protective presence of her brother Vernon, who had recently traveled from Missouri to offer his unwavering support to his distressed sister. Karen was at home with her brother Vernon, who'd recently arrived from Missouri. His arrival was specifically prompted by Karen's distressing call delivering the news of Paul's death, a call that Vernon recalled conveying profound shock and sadness. She called me and said, well, they found him, and she told me what had happened. So I loaded up and went to Phoenix right away. His presence during such a critical time suggested strong family solidarity and a comforting buffer. For Karen, ironically, and with chilling foresight for the investigators, they were in the living room, looking over Paul's insurance paperwork, when the investigators knocked on the door. This incredibly ill-timed detail. Karen reviewing life insurance documents just as police arrived for a murder inquiry, immediately and overtly linked Karen to the powerful financial motive investigators had only recently uncovered, creating an uncomfortable and deeply suspicious visual juxtaposition with the gravity of the impending confrontation. Vernon recounted the dramatic and intimidating entry of law enforcement, an unmissable display of official authority and determined intent. I went to the door. When I opened up the door, there were 5 or 6 police officers and detectives. The sheer number of officers, combined with their readiness and the visible presence of firearms, immediately communicated the extreme seriousness of the situation, signaling that this was far beyond a routine inquiry. All had guns pointing at me, this overt show of force, though perhaps standard procedure for serving a high-stakes warrant for a potential murder suspect, undoubtedly added to the dramatic impact for Vernon, creating a chilling tableau. The investigators, wasting no time on pleasantries, clearly communicated their authority and their purpose with a blunt precision. The investigators ordered Karen and her brother out of the house. They then brandished a crucial legal document that explicitly authorized their intrusive presence. They had papers with them, and they showed them Karen, and she said, "This is a search warrant." This undeniable legal mandate allowed them to thoroughly and forensically comb the residence for further evidence linking Karen to the murder, ensuring a comprehensive collection of any potential clues, while one dedicated team of investigators meticulously worked inside. And while one team of investigators went inside to look for evidence, another simultaneously ensured Karen's immediate isolation from her brother and her direct transportation for focused questioning. Another loaded Karen in the back of a patrol car and took her in for questioning. Despite the overwhelming and intentionally intimidating display of law enforcement force, designed to shatter a perpetrator's composure and elicit information, Karen, as meticulously observed and recalled by her brother Vernon, maintained an unnerving, almost pathological, composure, a stark facade of calm that profoundly belied the immense gravity of the situation and the implicit accusations. That spooked me, but she kept a cool head. Her incredible ability to control her outward emotional response, to present an impenetrable front in such an acutely high-stress and incriminating environment, was remarkable, hinting strongly at a robust, perhaps psychopathic, self-control under duress, a trait often disturbingly observed in individuals with a profoundly disconnected emotional state. Her apparent lack of worry, her dismissive confidence, even as she was being taken for intensive interrogation, indicated a profound and dangerous overconfidence in her ability to manipulate situations and ultimately evade justice. And she didn't act like she was too worried when they let her out of the car, whether they're not going to find anything. This casual dismissal of the police's capabilities, her almost arrogant certainty that they would uncover nothing, spoke volumes about her deeply manipulative mindset and her deluded sense of impunity. However, Karen had indeed spoken far too soon, and her confidence was devastatingly misplaced. Inside the house, concurrently with her transportation to the station, the investigative team meticulously uncovered further, damning evidence that undeniably pointed to profound and undeniable financial motive for Paul's murder, had she spoken too soon. Inside the house, the investigators uncovered more evidence that pointed to a possible financial motive. A deep and systematic dive into her personal financial history, spanning several years, revealed a staggering, unsustainable level of personal indebtedness, placing immense financial pressure on her. Looking through the financial records of Paul and Karen, they determined that she had run up $40,000 or $50,000 worth of credit, card debt. This crippling, escalating debt provided a stark, urgent financial pressure point, offering a powerful and compelling explanation for her actions when chillingly viewed alongside the massive life insurance policies she had recently taken out on Paul. The connection between her desperate financial state and the motive for murder was glaringly clear and chillingly obvious to the experienced investigators, prompting a direct, almost accusatory internal monologue that captured the stark reality of the situation. You're 50 grand in debt, and you've got this huge policy, and all of a sudden he comes up dead in the middle of the desert. No ID. It really makes you start thinking. This powerful internal reflection, articulating profound logical leap for the detective, represented the moment of stark logical deduction that transformed mere suspicion into conviction, painting a clear picture of a financially motivated murder with Karen at its chilling center. And then, with the most chilling and irrefutable confirmation, the investigators made another, highly disturbing discovery during the search of Karen's home, directly and unequivocally linking to the previous near-lethal poisoning attempt Paul had tragically endured, a discovery that shattered any pretense of Karen's innocence regarding that event. And then there was what the investigators found in the master bedroom, in an intimate and deeply personal space within the supposed sanctuary of their marital home, the master bedroom itself. In a vase near the headboard in the master bedroom, they found a vial of mercury. This was far from a common household item. Its dangerous presence and placement in such a personal setting, given Paul's prior mercury poisoning incident, was damning evidence of malicious intent. Based on the anecdotal accounts vividly recalled from Paul's friends regarding the suspiciously tainted tuna sandwich incident, this discovery of liquid mercury in Karen's home was profoundly unsettling and highly anomalous, confirming a dark suspicion. Based on what Paul's friends had told police about mercury, they found it very odd. The rhetorical question, who has mercury in their house, precisely captured the inherent strangeness and sheer abnormality of the finding, highlighting its specific and exclusive connection to potential criminal intent, especially against Paul. Its presence certainly looked profoundly and undeniably suspicious, forming a direct, physical, and undeniable link to a previous calculated attempt on Paul's life. It certainly looked suspicious. However, despite the undeniable presence of the deadly substance in Karen's intimate living space, and its clear, documented connection to Paul's prior near poisoning, the critical forensic and legal fact remained that Paul ultimately didn't die of mercury poisoning. This nuanced but crucial detail presented a subtle legal challenge for the prosecutors, distinguishing between a prior act of attempted murder and the eventual, different cause of his death. Since Paul didn't die of mercury poisoning was enough, while it unequivocally implied malicious intent, demonstrated undeniable premeditation for a prior crime, and provided a chilling glimpse into Karen's murderous psyche. It did not directly link Karen to the immediate cause of Paul's death by blunt force trauma, stabbing, and gunshots in the desert. They needed more. They needed more details. Specifically, for a first-degree murder charge to definitively stick and ensure a robust conviction, they still couldn't put her at the scene of Paul's murder in the remote desert through irrefutable physical evidence directly linking her to the execution of the crime itself. Beyond compelling circumstantial inferences, this forensic gap, while frustrating, remained a hurdle. Still, despite these lingering evidentiary gaps, the sheer and overwhelming weight of accumulating circumstantial evidence, the massive debt, the lucrative life insurance policies, the clear and powerful financial motive, Paul's specific suspicions of an affair, and now the undeniable physical presence of lethal mercury in her home, directly linking to a prior murder attempt, compelled the investigators to confront Karen directly and aggressively in the interrogation room, sensing she was at her breaking point. With the unyielding weight of circumstantial evidence now meticulously stacked against her, undeniable proof of her immense debt, and the shocking discovery of mercury in her home, investigators escalated the psychological pressure in the interrogation room. Still, the investigators sat Karen down in the interrogation room and confronted her with what they found. This was no longer a gentle inquiry, no polite conversation. It was a deliberate, intense, and psychologically focused interrogation, rigorously designed to shatter her composure, break down her defenses, and force a confession, or at least further, incriminating admissions. The central question for the experienced interrogators, one that guided their relentless questioning, was direct